Ladies and gentlemen, we've all been there. Someone walks into the room and it feels like their only mission is to prove they're smarter, stronger, or more important than you. And if you're not careful, you can get pulled into their game of one-upmanship. But here's the truth. Their need to act superior isn't about your weakness. It's about their insecurity. The real power comes when you know how to handle it without losing your cool, your confidence, or your respect. 1. Stay grounded in your confidence. When someone acts like they're above you, remember this. Confidence is quiet. Insecurity is loud. Their behavior doesn't lower your value. It only exposes theirs. The best response is staying calm, collected, and steady in who you are. 2. Don't compete. Detach the moment you start trying to prove yourself. You've already given them what they want. A contest. Don't play. Instead, detach. Let them win the imaginary scoreboard in their head while you win the real one. Your peace of mind. 3. Respond. Don't react. Arrogance feeds off reaction. If they throw shade or belittle you, don't take the bait. A steady pause, a calm tone, and a short response show that you control the conversation, not them. 4. Use questions to disarm. Questions are powerful. Instead of pushing back with defensiveness, try this. That's interesting. Why do you see it that way? Questions turn the spotlight back on them, forcing reflection instead of dominance. 5. Set clear boundaries. Respect isn't optional, it's required. If someone constantly crosses the line, say it clearly. I'm not okay with being spoken to like that. Boundaries aren't rude, they're healthy. 6. Shift focus back to value. When the conversation gets hijacked by ego, steer it back to facts and solutions. Talk about the work, the idea, the goal, not the personalities. This keeps the focus on what matters instead of who's better. 7. Practice empathy without surrender. Most people who act superior are covering up insecurity. You can acknowledge their perspective without bowing to their ego. Empathy isn't weakness, it's control with compassion. 8. Walk away when necessary. Not every battle deserves your energy. If someone refuses to respect you, walking away is the most powerful response. Silence can say more than words ever could. When you deal with someone who acts like they're better than you, the first and most important thing is to stay grounded in your confidence. Because here's the reality. People who try to act superior are often loud about it. They want the room to notice them. They want recognition. They want you to feel small so they can feel big. Confidence, on the other hand, doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to prove itself. It's steady. It's quiet, and it's the thing that keeps you from crumbling under someone else's arrogance. Think about this. When someone flexes their so-called intelligence, money, or status in front of you, what's the natural reaction most people feel? Defensiveness. That urge to fight back, to prove yourself, to say, I belong here too. But here's where you separate yourself from the crowd. Instead of letting that defensive energy take over, you anchor yourself. You remind yourself that their opinion doesn't define you. Their words don't change your worth, and their behavior doesn't lower your value. What they're really doing is showing you their insecurity, because truly confident people don't need to make others feel small. And staying grounded doesn't mean being silent or passive. It means you choose how you show up. When you know who you are, you don't need to match their volume. You don't need to compete for space. You let them perform and you stay centered. There's power in that stillness. There's strength in knowing you don't have to play the game to win it. Confidence is also about body language. The way you sit, the way you hold eye contact, the calm in your tone. Those things speak louder than the words you use. If someone is trying to dominate a conversation, don't fold your shoulders. Don't shrink your voice. Don't rush your words. Sit up straight. Speak at your pace. Hold your ground with your presence. That subtle control tells them without you saying it. You don't intimidate me. Another part of staying grounded is perspective. Remind yourself that superiority is often a mask. When people act like they're better than you, they're covering something up. Fear of being irrelevant, fear of not being enough, fear of being overlooked. Their arrogance is armor, and the louder they wear it, the more fragile they probably are underneath. And the moment you see that, you stop taking their behavior personally. You don't carry it around as an insult. You recognize it for what it is, someone else's insecurity, spilling into the room. Confidence also grows when you practice self-respect daily. That means you don't let small comments slide into your head and stay there. You don't replay their words over and over again wondering if they're right. Instead, you check yourself. Do I believe I'm capable? Do I know my value? Am I clear on what I bring to the table? When your answers are yes, their arrogance loses its power over you. When you come across someone who constantly acts like they're better than you, your first instinct might be to push back and prove them wrong. It's natural. When they brag about their success, you feel like you need to share yours. When they try to one-up you, you feel tempted to one-up them back. That's human nature. But here's the trap. Every time you step into that competition, you're playing on their field. You're giving them exactly what they want, a contest of who's greater. And when you do that, you've already given away your power. Because you're no longer operating from a place of confidence. You're operating from a place of insecurity. You're letting their arrogance set the rules of the game. Detachment is where real strength shows. Detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you let people walk over you. It means you refuse to enter a fight that was designed to drain your energy in the first place. When someone is trying to prove their superiority, the best move isn't to match their ego. It's to step out of the ring altogether. Let them shadow box with themselves. Let them rack up imaginary points in their head. You stay focused on what matters. Your peace of mind, your self-respect, your clarity. Think about how powerful it feels when you don't take the bait. They drop a comment meant to belittle you. And instead of biting back, you pause, smile, and carry on with calm. That pause is not weakness. It's control. It shows that you're not trapped in the same need for validation that they are. You're not scrambling to prove your worth. You already know it. And that's why detachment feels so unsettling. To people who thrive on competition, they don't know what to do when you won't play the game. The beauty of detachment is that it also protects your energy. Competing with people who think they're better than you is exhausting. It keeps you locked in comparison, constantly measuring yourself against someone else's standards. And here's the thing. No matter how much you prove yourself, it'll never be enough for them. Because superiority isn't about reality. It's about perception. They're not looking for equality. They're looking for dominance. So the cycle never ends until you decide to step out of it. When you detach, you end the cycle. You choose not to measure your value by their yardstick. You choose not to waste energy on a battle that was never worth fighting. And detachment isn't about ignoring people completely either. You can engage, you can have conversations, you can work alongside them. The difference is you're not attaching your identity to their opinion. Their comments don't get under your skin. Their arrogance doesn't knock you off balance. You see it for what it is, a performance. And you don't buy a ticket to the show when you're dealing with someone who acts like they're better than you. The easiest mistake you can make is to react. That's exactly what they're fishing for. They throw a sharp comment, and you snap back. They roll their eyes and you raise your voice. They try to make you feel small and suddenly you're scrambling to defend yourself. That's reaction. And every time you react, you're giving them control over your emotions. They pull the string, you jump. They push the button, you light up. It's predictable. It's impulsive. And it leaves you feeling drained, because afterward you realize you played right into their hands. Responding, on the other hand, is a different kind of power. Responding means you take a breath, you pause, and you choose what comes next. It's not about silence or letting things slide. It's about refusing to give away your emotional steering wheel. When you respond, you're in control of the tone, the pace, and the outcome of the conversation. That's where dignity lives. That's where confidence lives. Because you're no longer dancing to their music. You're creating your own rhythm. Think about a time when someone said something designed to provoke you. Maybe they questioned your intelligence in front of others, or they dismissed your idea with a smirk. The urge to snap back is immediate. That's the reaction. But imagine instead that you take 1 second to breathe. That 1 second changes everything. Instead of matching their energy, you lower yours to calm. Instead of defending yourself with a long explanation, you answer with short, steady words. Something like, "That's your perspective," or "I hear you." It's simple, it's controlled, and it doesn't feed their fire. You're showing them that they don't get to dictate your behavior. Responding also forces people to reveal themselves. When you react, the focus shifts to your outburst. Now you're the one who looks defensive or emotional. But when you respond calmly, their arrogance stays in the spotlight. People can see it clearly because you didn't muddy the water with your reaction. And often that's enough to expose what's really happening, without you ever needing to point it out. Another thing about responding is that it buys you time. You don't owe anyone an immediate answer. You don't have to match their speed. When you slow down, you make better choices. You decide whether to clarify, to redirect, or to set a boundary. And the slower you move, the less power their arrogance has over you. Because arrogance thrives on pulling you into a fast, heated exchange. Calm is the opposite. Calm disarms. Calm confuses. Calm creates space where you get to decide the outcome, instead of letting them drag you into there. Responding instead of reacting is a skill. It's something you practice in small moments, when someone interrupts you, when someone dismisses your point, when someone tries to undermine you. Each time you pause, each time you choose calm words over sharp ones, you're building that muscle. And the stronger it gets, the less anyone can shake your ground. One of the smartest ways to handle people who think they're better than you is to flip the script with questions. Arrogant people thrive when they feel in control of the conversation. They want to dominate it, steer it, and make it about their superiority. But when you ask the right kind of questions, you take back control without ever raising your voice or entering into a power struggle. You move from defending yourself to putting the spotlight directly on them. And that's when things start to shift. Questions have a way of forcing people to think. If someone is trying to belittle you or push their opinion, as if it's the only one that matters, instead of shutting down or firing back, you can calmly ask, "What makes you say that?" Or "Why do you see it that way?" These aren't aggressive comebacks. They're open-ended prompts that push the other person to explain themselves. And often the moment they have to slow down and articulate their reasoning, their arrogance doesn't sound as strong as it did when it was just delivered as a blunt statement. The key here is tone. The same question can either escalate a situation or completely disarm it, depending on how you act. If your tone is sharp, it comes off as sarcastic or defensive. But if your tone is calm, curious, and steady, it creates a pause. That pause is powerful. It disrupts their rhythm. It stops them from bulldozing through the conversation and forces them into a different mode, reflection instead of domination. Another kind of question that works well is one that shifts focus back to the bigger picture. If someone is trying to show off or assert superiority, you can redirect by asking, "How do you think this helps us move forward?" Or "What solution do you see here?" Suddenly the conversation isn't about who's smarter or who's right. It's about progress. And if they don't have a clear answer, that becomes obvious without you having to point it out. Questions like these quietly expose whether someone is adding real value or just flexing their ego. Questions also protect your energy. When you ask instead of argue, you're not pouring your emotions into proving yourself. You're letting the other person carry the weight of explaining, clarifying, and justifying. That's their work to do, not yours. And as they talk, you stay composed, listening, nodding, and maintaining control over your own space. It's not about winning. It's about not losing yourself in their noise. Sometimes the most disarming question is the simplest one. "What do you mean?" It's short, it's neutral, and it forces them to go deeper than a surface-level jab. And the more detail they have to give, the less intimidating their superiority act starts to feel. Because superiority thrives on quick punches, not on careful explanation. By slowing the conversation with questions, you strip away that momentum. When you deal with people who act like they're better than you, there comes a point where confidence, calmness, and even questions aren't enough. Because some people won't just throw out the occasional arrogant remark. They'll push and they'll keep pushing. And if you let it slide every time, they'll take it as permission to keep crossing the line. That's where boundaries come in. Boundaries are not about shutting people out. They're about teaching people how to treat you. And if someone is acting superior, dismissive, or disrespectful, a clear boundary is what communicates that their behavior isn't acceptable. A lot of people hesitate to set boundaries because they don't want to come across as rude or confrontational. But here's the thing, boundaries aren't rude. Boundaries are healthy. Boundaries are respectful. They protect yourself, respect while still leaving room for healthy connection. And when you state one calmly and clearly, it actually makes you look stronger, not harsh. Imagine someone constantly interrupting you in a meeting to show off what they know. You could sit there frustrated, or you could calmly say, "I'd like to finish my point," before moving on. That's a boundary. It's not emotional. It's not aggressive. It's just the power of boundaries is in their clarity. Vague hints don't work. Sarcasm doesn't work. Hoping they'll just get the message doesn't work. Boundaries require clear words. Something like, "I'm not okay with being spoken to that way." Or, "If we're going to have this conversation, it needs to be respectful." Those sentences don't attack the person, they call out the behavior. And that difference is important. You're not saying you're arrogant. You're saying, "This behavior is not okay with me." That's how you separate their identity from their actions, while still protecting yourself. And here's where most people get boundaries wrong. It's not just about saying them. It's about following through. If you set a boundary and then let it slide the next time,
You've taught the other person that your words don't carry weight. Boundaries without consistency are just suggestions. Boundaries with consistency become standard. And the more you uphold them, the more people around you learn how to treat you, even the ones who come in with arrogance. It's also worth noting that boundaries don't always need to be loud or public. Sometimes the clearest boundary is removing yourself from the situation. If someone keeps talking down to you, and they don't respond to your words, you can choose to step away. You can shorten conversations, limit your availability, or avoid feeding into their ego. Distance is a boundary too, and sometimes it speaks louder than any sentence. Boundaries are also a reflection of self-worth. If you believe in your value, you protect it. If you don't, you'll tolerate disrespect and call it patience. Knowing where your line is and calmly enforcing it is one of the strongest messages you can send. Because when someone tries to assert superiority over you, your boundary is what reminds them, and more importantly, reminds you that respect is not optional. It's required when someone tries to act like they're above you. It's easy for the entire conversation to get hijacked by ego. Suddenly, it's not about solving the problem, not about sharing ideas, not about progress. It's about who looks smarter, who gets the last word, who leaves feeling superior. And if you let yourself get caught in that cycle, you end up arguing in circles, wasting energy, and walking away frustrated. That's why shifting the focus back to value is one of the smartest things you can do, because value is undeniable. It's grounded, it's practical, it moves things forward instead of keeping them stuck in a tug of war of ego. When someone is trying to show off, they're drawing attention to themselves. They want recognition, they want to be seen as more important. But when you redirect the focus to value, you change the entire dynamic. For example, if someone is dismissing your idea and trying to make their sound superior, instead of debating who's right, you can say, let's focus on what gets the best result here. That one sentence takes the attention off of personalities and puts it back on solution. It cuts through arrogance and grounds the conversation in something productive. The key to this is staying calm and factual. Value doesn't need exaggeration or defensiveness. It stands on its own. If someone tries to flex their knowledge, you can acknowledge it briefly, but then redirect. That's one perspective. Here's what I think actually works for the goal we're trying to hit. You're not dismissing them, but you're also not letting their ego dominate the room. You're reminding everyone that what matters most is not who shines the brightest, but what creates the best out. Another way to shift focus back to value is by bringing the conversation into measurable ground. Arrogance loves vague generalizations like, I know more about this than anyone else, or that's not the way things should be done. Instead of arguing, you can anchor the conversation with specific, here's the data we have, here's what's worked in the past, here's what will actually solve the problem. Facts are hard to argue with. They take the wind out of superiority, because facts don't bend to ego. They either support the claim or they don't. And shifting focus doesn't just work in professional conversations, it works in personal ones too. If someone is trying to outshine you in a group setting, bragging or one-upping every story you share, you can bring the focus back by engaging the group on something meaningful, instead of competing with the brag. You don't have to top their story. You can ask the group a thoughtful question, or you can pivot to a subject that invites more voices in. That way the spotlight shifts away from their ego show and onto something that creates connection and value for everyone. The real strength of this approach is that it shows you're not easily baited. You're not here to play in the shallow end of one-up games. You're here for depth, progress, and purpose. And the more you do this, the more people know. Even if the arrogant person doesn't change, the people around you see the difference between someone trying to dominate and someone trying to create value. And that difference earns more respect than superiority ever could. When someone acts like they're better than you, the last thing you probably feel like doing is showing empathy. In fact, your instinct might be to roll your eyes, tune them out, or snap back. And that's understandable, because arrogance is frustrating, and it feels like the opposite of what deserves compassion. But empathy doesn't mean agreeing with them, and it doesn't mean letting their superiority slide. It means recognizing what's underneath the behavior, without letting it control you. Because most of the time, superiority is a mask. People who constantly act above others usually do it because they feel below in some area of their own life. Their arrogance is armor, and empathy is simply the ability to see that without letting yourself get pulled under by it. Practicing empathy without surrender starts with shifting how you see them. Instead of labeling them as just difficult or obnoxious, remind yourself that this behavior is usually rooted in insecurity. When someone has to constantly remind you how smart they are, how successful they are, how much more they know than you, it's usually because deep down, they don't actually feel that secure. Confident people don't need to broadcast their value. So when you recognize arrogance as insecurity in disguise, it softens the way you view it, doesn't excuse the behavior, but it makes it easier not to take it personally. Empathy also changes how you respond in the moment. Instead of firing back with sarcasm or defensiveness, you can take a calmer route. For example, if someone is belittling your work, instead of snapping, you might say, "I hear that you have a different perspective." It's not surrender, because you're not agreeing, but it's also not escalate. You're acknowledging their words, without giving them control over your emotions. That balance is where empathy shows up as strength. Another layer of empathy is understanding that people who need to feel superior often crave validation. And while it's not your job to feed their ego, sometimes offering a simple acknowledgement can diffuse tension. Something as small as "you clearly have a lot of experience in this area" can lower their defensiveness enough for you to redirect the conversation back to balance. That doesn't mean you're giving up your ground. It just means you're choosing a smarter strategy. Because sometimes the fastest way to get someone to stop pushing is to give them just enough recognition that they no longer feel the need to prove themselves in front of you. The challenge is making sure empathy doesn't cross over into surrender. You can understand why someone acts the way they do without excusing it, and you can acknowledge their perspective without adopting it. Empathy should never come at the expense of your boundaries or your self-respect. That's where many people get it wrong. They think being empathetic means being passive. It doesn't. It means you can see the human beneath the behavior, while still standing firm in your own dignity. And that combination of compassion and strength is often more disarming than any argument you could make. Sometimes the smartest way to deal with people who think they're better than you isn't about standing your ground, debating with calm logic, or redirecting the conversation. It's about knowing when to walk away. Because the truth is, not every person deserves your energy. Not every situation calls for a response, and not every interaction is worth trying to fix. There are moments when the strongest, most dignified move you can make is to step back, create distance, and refuse to give them the attention they're trying to pull from you. Walking away doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're wise enough to know where your energy belongs. The tricky part is that walking away can feel like losing. In the heat of the moment, it can feel like they've won because you didn't fight back or prove yourself. But that's the illusion. People who constantly act superior want you to engage. They want the argument, the back and forth, the competition, because it feeds their sense of importance. By walking away, you're not losing. You're denying them the very fuel they're looking for. You're choosing peace over drama, clarity over chaos, and self-respect over pointless battle. Walking away also protects your emotional balance. When you stay in the presence of arrogance for too long, it wears on you. You start questioning yourself, doubting your abilities, or replaying the conversation long after it's over. That's how arrogance wins. It lingers in your head, even when the person isn't around anymore. But when you remove yourself, you cut off that cycle. You create space for your mind to breathe, to reset, to focus on something that actually matters, instead of wasting hours mentally arguing with someone who is never going to hear you anyway. Sometimes walking away doesn't have to be physical. It can mean shortening the conversation, keeping your answers brief, or limiting how much time you allow that person to take from you. It can mean choosing not to respond to a text designed to bait you into defensive. It can mean politely excusing yourself from a meeting where someone is clearly more focused on looking impressive than on solving the problem. Walking away is less about the action itself, and more about the decision to withdraw your energy from a place where it's being wasted. And the truth is, some people will never change. No matter how calm you are, no matter how many boundaries you set, no matter how much empathy you show, their superiority complex runs too deep. That's not on you to fix. Your responsibility is to yourself, to protect your self-respect, your peace, and your time. And sometimes that means making the tough call that you don't need to be around them at all. Whether it's creating distance in a workplace interaction, or limiting contact in your personal life, the freedom that comes from walking away is often the clearest reminder that you don't need anyone's approval to know your worth. At the end of the day, dealing with people who think they're better than you isn't about changing them. It's about strengthening you. You can't control their arrogance, but you can control how you carry yourself. You can choose confidence over insecurity, detachment over competition, responses over reactions. You can ask the right questions, set the right boundaries, focus on what truly matters, and show empathy without surrender. And when all else fails, you always have the choice to walk away. That's real power. Because superiority is just noise, but dignity, that's quiet, steady and unshakable. And when you stand in that, no one gets to tell you